Hello, dear listeners. Welcome back to Shadow Storyteller, the place where real tales unfold in the quiet hours before sleep. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Your support helps bring more true, chilling, and unforgettable accounts to life. Now settle in, dim the lights, and let tonight's story begin. On a crisp autumn evening in the year 2023, beneath a sky streaked with fading amber and violet, the small town of Brindle Hollow, nestled deep in the wooded hills of western Pennsylvania, seemed wrapped in its usual hush. Leaves crunched underfoot, streetlights flickered on one by one, and the distant hum of a passing pickup truck was the only reminder that the modern world still touched this forgotten corner of America. But that night, something stirred, something born not of the wind or the woods, but of a digital dare gone terribly wrong. It started as so many strange things do these days on TikTok. A new challenge had begun circulating among teenagers across the country. It wasn't the usual dance trend or makeup transformation. This one carried a whisper of the occult, wrapped in the glossy packaging of internet virality. The Mirror Whisper Challenge, as it was called, urged participants to stand before a mirror at exactly 11:59 p.m., light a single white candle, and whisper a phrase backward, "I see you but you don't see me." The rules claimed that if done correctly, your reflection would blink when you didn't, or worse, smile when you weren't. Most dismissed it as harmless creepypasta, the kind of thing kids tried for a few cheap thrills and a handful of likes. But in Brindle Hollow, where old superstitions still clung to porch rails and cellar doors like cobwebs, some took it more seriously. 17-year-old Corwin Vale, a quiet boy with ink-stained fingers and a habit of sketching storm clouds in the margins of his notebooks, wasn't one for trends. He preferred vinyl records, second-hand bookstores, and the company of his grandfather's ghost stories. But his younger sister, Lyra, 15, restless and desperate to prove she wasn't just a kid, had other ideas. She'd seen the challenge trending on her For You page, watched a dozen creators scream laugh as their reflections glitched, and decided it would be the perfect way to finally get Corwin to pay attention to her online world. "You're being dramatic," Corwin had said that afternoon, not looking up from his sketch of a raven perched on a rusted weather vane. "It's just a mirror. Light bends, eyes get tired. That's all." "But what if it's not?" Lyra pressed, her voice edged with that particular blend of defiance and hope only teenagers can muster. "What if something answers?" Corwin finally looked up, frowning. "Don't do it, Lyra." She rolled her eyes, but that night, just before midnight, she crept into the upstairs bathroom, the one with the antique mirror framed in tarnished silver, a relic from their great-aunt's estate. The house was silent except for the groan of old pipes and the distant hoot of an owl. She placed a white taper candle on the sink, struck a match, and watched the flame catch, casting long, trembling shadows across the tiles. At 11:59 she faced the glass. Her breath fogged the surface for just a second before clearing. She swallowed, then whispered, slowly and deliberately, "Imtinad woy tub woy's I." The words felt wrong in her mouth, like chewing tin foil. She waited. Nothing happened. She let out a nervous laugh. "See? Stupid." But then, her reflection blinked. Lyra hadn't. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She stared harder. The reflection stared back, and tilted its head just slightly to the left. Lyra hadn't moved. "Okay, no," she muttered, stepping back. "This isn't funny." The candle flickered violently, though there was no draft. The flame stretched thin, then snapped back. In the mirror, Lyra's image remained still, but its eyes, they were darker now. Hollow. And the corners of its mouth twitched upward, not in a smile, but in something closer to hunger. Lyra screamed and stumbled backward, knocking over the candle. Wax splattered the sink as the flame guttered out. She fled the bathroom, slamming the door behind her, and didn't stop running until she crashed into Corwin's room. He was already sitting up, sketchbook in hand, as if he'd been waiting. "It moved," she gasped, tears streaking her cheeks. It smiled. "It wasn't me." Corwin didn't laugh. He didn't tell her it was her imagination. Instead, he set down his pencil, stood, and walked to the bathroom door. He didn't open it. He just stood there listening. From the other side, a soft tapping began, like fingernails on glass. The next morning, Lyra refused to go near the upstairs hallway. Their mother, a pragmatic nurse who believed in science and strong coffee, chalked it up to sleep deprivation and too much screen time. But Corwin knew better. He'd grown up hearing stories about mirrors, how they weren't just glass and silver but thresholds. His grandfather used to say that old mirrors, especially ones passed down through grief and loss, could remember things, and sometimes they invited things in. Over the next few days, strange things happened in the Vale house. Lights turned on by themselves. Whispers echoed in empty rooms. And every night, just before midnight, the bathroom doorknob would rattle gently, as if something were testing the lock. Corwin tried everything. He covered the mirror with a black cloth. He sprinkled salt along the windowsill. He even played recordings of Gregorian chants on his phone, much to Lyra's eye-rolling horror. But nothing worked. The presence grew bolder. Then, on the fifth night, Lyra woke to the sound of singing. It was a lullaby, one she didn't recognize, sung in a voice that was almost hers, but softer, slower, and laced with something cold. She followed it, barefoot and trembling, to the bathroom door. It stood ajar. Inside, the candle was lit again, though no one had touched it. And in the mirror, a girl who looked like Lyra, but with eyes like polished obsidian, was brushing her hair with slow, deliberate strokes. "Lyra," the reflection said without turning. "Come closer. I just want to show you something." Lyra backed away, but her feet wouldn't obey. They carried her forward, step by unwilling step, until her nose nearly touched the glass. The reflection smiled. And then it reached out. Not through the mirror. No, that would be too simple. Instead, Lyra felt a hand close around her wrist from behind. She whirled around, but the room was empty. When she looked back at the mirror, her reflection was gone. Only darkness stared back. She screamed, and this time Corwin came running with a baseball bat and a flashlight. He found her curled on the floor, shivering, her wrist marked with 5 faint, icy bruises in the shape of fingers. The next day, Corwin drove into town and visited Mrs. Ellery, the elderly owner of Brindle Hollow's only antique shop. She'd known his family for generations and had a reputation for knowing things that weren't in books. When he described the mirror, her face paled. "That mirror," she said, voice low, "belonged to Madeline Croft. She disappeared in 1938. They found her journal later. She'd been trying to contact her dead twin through the glass. Said the mirror showed her things, truths she called them. But the last entry just said, 'It's not her anymore.'" Corwin returned home with a plan. That night, he waited until Lyra was asleep, then went to the bathroom alone. He removed the cloth. The mirror was fogged, though the air was dry. Words were forming in the condensation, letter by letter. "Let me out." Corwin took a deep breath. "You're not her," he said firmly. "You don't belong here." The glass cracked, a thin, spiderweb line spreading from the center. The candle reignited on its own. And then the mirror shattered inward, not outward, as if something had pulled the shards into another space. Silence followed. The next morning, the bathroom was clean. No glass. No candle. Just an empty wall where the mirror had hung. Lyra never spoke of it again. But sometimes, late at night, Corwin would catch her staring at other reflective surfaces, windows, puddles, the polished surface of a spoon, with a look of wary recognition. As for the mirror whisper challenge, it vanished from TikTok within a week. No explanation. No takedown notice. Just gone. But in towns like Brindle Hollow, where the trees grow close and the past never really dies, people still whisper about the boy who faced the glass, and the thing that blinked back. And if you ever find yourself alone at night, standing before a mirror, and you feel the urge to whisper those words backward, remember Lyra Vale. Remember that not all reflections are your own. And some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. In the weeks that followed the mirror's disappearance, life in the Vale household settled into a fragile kind of normalcy. The bruise on Lyra's wrist faded, though she still flinched whenever someone reached for her too quickly. Corwin stopped sketching storm clouds and began drawing doorways instead, arched, shadowed thresholds with no handles, no hinges, just endless dark beyond. Their mother, sensing something she couldn't quite name, started leaving the hallway light on at night, humming old hymns under her breath as she washed dishes. She never asked questions. Some silences she knew were safer than answers. But Brindle Hollow had a way of holding on to echoes. It began with the neighbors. Old Mr. Haskins, who lived 3 houses down and rarely spoke to anyone since his wife passed, knocked on the Vala's front door one rainy Tuesday afternoon. He stood on the porch with his hat in his hands, eyes darting toward the upstairs window, the one that used to overlook the bathroom. "Your boy," he said, voice rough like gravel under boots. "He's got a sharp eye. Tell him I saw it too." Corwin, who'd been reading on the couch, looked up slowly. "Saw what?" Mr. Haskins didn't answer. He just nodded once, turned, and walked back down the driveway, his boots leaving wet prints on the stone path that vanished before they reached the street. Then came the dreams. Not just Lyra's, though she woke more than once gasping, convinced she'd heard the lullaby again, but Corwin's too. In his dreams, he stood in an endless hallway lined with mirrors, each one showing a different version of his sister. One Lyra was laughing. Another was crying. A third stood perfectly still, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. And at the very end of the hall, a mirror hung crookedly on the wall, cracked but intact, and inside it, something waited with its back turned. He never reached it. Every time he got close, the floor would drop away, and he'd wake up drenched in sweat, the taste of candle wax thick on his tongue. Meanwhile, online, whispers about the Mirror Whisper Challenge began to resurface. Not on TikTok but in darker corners of the internet. Reddit threads with titles like, "Did anyone else feel watched after the challenge?" or "Mirror glitch or something worse?" popped up, only to be deleted within hours. A YouTube video titled, "I did the mirror challenge and my reflection didn't blink." It spoke, gained over 200,000 views before vanishing entirely. The uploader's channel? Gone. Username? Untraceable. One night, while scrolling through archived forum posts on an old laptop, Corwin found a comment that made his blood run cold. "It doesn't end when the mirror breaks. It just finds another window." The post was dated 2 days before Madeline Croft vanished in 1938. He closed the laptop and didn't open it again for a week. Then, on the first snowfall of December, Lyra came home from school with a strange look in her eyes. She didn't say much at dinner, just pushed her mashed potatoes around her plate and stared out the kitchen window at the bare trees swaying in the wind. "Lyra?" Corwin asked gently. "You okay?" She blinked as if waking from a trance. "Yeah, just tired." But that night, Corwin heard her talking in her room, not to herself but to someone else. Her voice was soft, almost affectionate. "No, I know you're not her," she murmured. "But you're the only one who really sees me." Corwin pressed his ear to her door. There was no reply, only the faint sound of breathing that didn't belong to his sister. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning he found Lyra in the basement, standing in front of the washing machine. Its stainless steel door reflected her face in a warped, silvery curve. She was smiling. "Lyra," he said, stepping forward. "Step away from it." She turned slowly. "What?" "It's just metal. It's a surface. That's all it takes." She laughed, a sound that was too light, too practiced. "You're being paranoid, Corwin. It's over. It's gone." But it wasn't. Because later that day, while helping their mother fold laundry, Lyra reached for a sweater, and her reflection in the sliding glass door behind her didn't move at the same time. It lagged. Just a fraction of a second. But Corwin saw it. That evening he drove back to Mrs. Ellery's shop. The bell above the door jingled weakly as he entered. She was dusting a porcelain doll with glass eyes that followed him as he walked. "You came back," she said, not looking up. "That means it's still with you." "It's using other reflections now," Corwin said, voice low. "Windows, puddles, even the toaster. It's learning." Mrs. Ellery set the doll down carefully. "Madeline didn't just open a door," she said. "She invited a tenant. And tenants don't leave unless you pay the price." "What price?" "The same one Madeline paid." She met his eyes then, and for the first time, Corwin saw real fear in them. "A name, a memory, a piece of yourself. It wants to be seen, Corwin. Not as a shadow, not as a trick of the light, but as real." And the only way it can be real is if someone forgets who they are. Corwin's stomach dropped. Lyra. She's already halfway there, Mrs. Ellery whispered. Every time she looks, it whispers. Every time she listens, it grows. Soon it won't need the glass at all. He left the shop with a small leather pouch Mrs. Ellery pressed into his hand. Inside were dried rosemary, crushed quartz, and a sliver of obsidian wrapped in red thread. Hang it where she sleeps, the old woman said. It won't banish it, but it might buy you time. That night, Corwin tied the pouch to the bedpost above Lyra's mattress. She didn't notice. She was already asleep, or pretending to be. For 3 nights the house was quiet. No whispers. No cold spots. No lullabies. Then on the 4th night the power went out. Not just in their house, in the whole block. The wind howled through the pines and snow fell in thick, muffled sheets. Corwin lit a lantern and checked on Lyra. Her bed was empty. Panic seized him. He ran downstairs, calling her name, his voice swallowed by the storm. The front door stood ajar, snow drifting across the welcome mat. He followed her footprints into the woods behind the house. Small, precise, leading straight to the old creek where kids used to skip stones in summer. There, in the center of the frozen water, Lyra stood facing the ice. The surface was smooth as glass. And beneath it, something stared up. Lyra. Corwin shouted, slipping on the bank. Get back. She turned and her eyes, her real eyes, were wide with terror. I didn't mean to come here, she sobbed. It pulled me. It said if I looked one more time it would let me go. Corwin lunged forward, grabbing her arm and yanking her away just as the ice beneath her feet cracked with a sound like breaking bone. Dark water surged up through the fissure, but there was no current, no splash, just a slow, deliberate rise, as if something were pushing upward from below. They ran. Back in the house, Corwin locked every window, drew every curtain, and covered every reflective surface with sheets, towels, even cardboard. He unplugged the microwave, turned the TV to face the wall, and filled the sink with dish soap to blur the faucet's shine. Lyra sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, shaking. It's not going to stop, is it? She whispered. Corwin sat beside her. No, he admitted. But we don't have to play by its rules. The next day he took down every mirror in the house, even the rear view in his car. He replaced glass picture frames with wood. He painted over the glossy finish on the front door. And he taught Lyra a new rule: never look directly at your reflection. If you must, glance sideways. Blink fast. Never hold its gaze. Months passed. Spring came. The snow melted. The world greened. And slowly the presence receded, not gone but quieter, like a predator waiting in the tall grass. Then one evening in late May, Corwin received a message from an unknown number. No text. Just a photo. It showed a teenage girl standing in front of a bathroom mirror in a town 3 states away. The candle was lit. The words were whispered. And in the reflection, her smile was just a little too wide. Beneath the image, a single line appeared. She's waiting for you to forget. Corwin deleted the message. But he knew. It wasn't over. Because the Mirror Whisper Challenge had never been about the mirror. It was about the watcher. And somewhere, in 1,000 homes across the country, another teenager was lighting a candle, whispering backward, and wondering why their reflection hadn't blinked yet. But it would. It always does. The summer after the ice incident, Brindle Hollow baked under a relentless sun. Cicadas screamed in the trees, the air hung thick with humidity, and the creek where Lyra had nearly vanished now shimmered with deceptive calm, its surface smooth as polished stone. To outsiders the town looked peaceful, quaint even. But Corwin knew better. Peace wasn't the absence of noise. It was the silence before something stirred again. Lyra had stopped looking at her phone before bed. She no longer hummed in the shower or lingered near glass doors. She'd taken to wearing sunglasses indoors sometimes, not out of fashion but because the lenses blurred reflections just enough to make them harmless. Corwin noticed, but he never said a word. Some wounds heal in silence. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a utility bill and a coupon for lawn fertilizer. No return address. Just their name, Vale, and the Brindle Hollow zip code, written in looping old-fashioned script that looked like it belonged in a century-old diary. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed paper, brittle at the edges, and a pressed forget-me-not flower tied with black thread. The handwriting matched the journal entry Mrs. Ellery had once shown Corwin, Madeline Crofts. "It wears faces like coats," the letter read. "First your sister's, then yours, then your mother's. It learns your voice, your laugh, your fears. And when it knows you well enough, it steps out. Not through glass, through memory, through love. That's how it wins. Not by scaring you, but by becoming you." Beneath the words, someone, or something, had drawn a small mirror, and inside it, a figure with no features at all. Corwin burned the letter in the backyard that night, watching the flames curl the paper into ash. But the words stayed with him, echoing in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn. He began researching obsessively, not online where digital trails could be followed, but in the town's tiny library, buried in folklore sections and local history archives. He learned that Brindle Hollow had once been called Vale's End by early settlers, who believed the dense woods and winding creeks created natural thresholds between worlds. Mirrors, they thought, were not just tools for vanity, but anchors for what lingered on the other side. He also found records of disappearances. Not just Madeline Croft in 1938, but others. A boy in 1952 who vanished after claiming his bedroom window showed a different house at night. A woman in 1979 who walked into a lake, saying her reflection had asked her to come home. Each case shared one detail. They all involved reflective surfaces in the final hours. And each victim was last seen smiling. One afternoon, while sorting through microfiche reels in the library basement, Corwin stumbled upon a faded newspaper clipping from 1941. It featured a blurry photograph of a teenage girl standing beside a carnival mirror maze. Her name was Elira Voss. No relation, but the resemblance to Lyra was uncanny. Same sharp chin, same wide-set eyes. The article described how she'd entered the maze during the Brindle County Fair and never came out. Search parties found her shoes neatly placed at the exit, but no trace of her body. The only clue? A single sentence scrawled on the inside of one distorted mirror: "She let me wear her." Corwin's hands trembled as he copied the quote into his notebook. That evening he found Lyra sitting on the back porch, staring at the still surface of a rain barrel. The water had collected after a brief afternoon shower, and her reflection stared back, perfectly still. "Lyra," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She didn't turn. "It's not talking anymore," she murmured. "But it's watching. Always watching." He sat beside her. "We're going to end this." "How?" she asked, finally looking at him. Her eyes were tired but clear. "You can't fight something that lives in glass." "No," Corwin said. "But you can starve it." The idea came to him in a dream that night. A dream where he stood in the hallway of mirrors again, but this time he carried a hammer. Instead of walking toward the cracked mirror at the end, he turned and smashed every one behind him. With each shatter, the hallway grew shorter, the darkness receding. When he woke, he knew what he had to do. Not destroy reflections, but deny them meaning. Over the next week, Corwin began a quiet campaign of erasure. He replaced all glassware in the house with ceramic mugs and plastic bowls. He covered car windows with sunshades when parked. He even convinced their mother to switch to a matte finish phone screen protector. But the real work was psychological. He taught Lyra new habits. When she washed her face, she kept her eyes closed. When she walked past store windows, she focused on the sky. When she brushed her hair, she did it by touch, not sight. It was exhausting, unnatural, but necessary. And it worked. The whispers stopped. The dreams faded. Even the air in the house felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. But then in early August, a new TikTok trend surfaced. Not a challenge this time, but a filter. It was called Echo Lens. At first glance, it seemed harmless. It added a soft glow to your selfie with subtle ripples around the edges, like you were looking through water. But users quickly noticed something strange. If you held your phone still for more than 5 seconds, your reflection in the filter would blink. Independently. Within days, #EchoLens had millions of views. Teens posted videos laughing as their digital selves glitched, unaware that each use was a tiny invitation. Corwin saw it the moment it trended. His blood turned to ice. He tracked the filter's origin to a developer account with no real name, no location, and a profile picture that was just a black mirror. The account had been created exactly 1 year to the day after Lyra first performed the Mirror Whisper Challenge. He reported it, flagged it, messaged TikTok support. But the filter remained, spreading like mold through the app's algorithm. Worse, Lyra's best friend from school, a girl named Tamsin Reed, posted a video using it. In the clip, Tamsin giggled as her filtered reflection mouthed words she wasn't saying. The caption read, "Okay, this is kinda creepy but also cool." Corwin showed Lyra the video. Her face went pale. "We have to warn her," she said. They drove to Tamsin's house that evening. She lived on the edge of town in a modern split level with floor-to-ceiling windows. When she opened the door, she looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes. "I haven't slept in 2 nights," she admitted, voice shaky. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear my voice, but it's not mine." Corwin didn't waste time. He told her everything: the mirror, the ice, Madeline Croft, the letter. Tamsin listened, arms crossed, but didn't laugh. She'd seen too much already. "I thought it was just a glitch," she whispered. "But last night, my reflection didn't follow me when I turned away. It stayed facing the camera, smiling." Corwin handed her a small pouch, identical to the one Mrs. Ellery had given him, filled with rosemary, quartz, and obsidian. "Hang this by your bed. Don't look directly at any screen tonight. And whatever you do, don't whisper." Tamsin nodded, gripping the pouch like a lifeline. For a week, nothing happened. Tamsin texted Lyra that she was sleeping better. The filter, meanwhile, began losing popularity. Users complained it made their phones feel cold or gave them headaches. TikTok quietly removed it without explanation. Hope flickered. Then, on a humid Friday night, sirens wailed through Brindle Hollow. Corwin woke to flashing red lights outside. He ran to the window. 2 police cars were parked in front of Tamsin's house. Neighbors gathered on lawns in bathrobes and slippers, murmuring. By dawn, the news spread. Tamsin Reed had disappeared. Her phone was found on her bed, screen cracked, still open to the front camera. The last thing recorded? A 10-second video of her sleeping, until her reflection sat up, looked directly into the lens and whispered, "I'm ready now." There was no sign of struggle. No footprints. Just an open window, curtains fluttering in the breeze, and a puddle of water on the floor beneath it, though it hadn't rained in days. At the funeral, held under a sky heavy with unshed rain, Lyra stood apart from the crowd, arms wrapped around herself. She didn't cry. She just stared at the polished surface of the casket, watching her own reflection warp in its curve. "She didn't believe me enough," Lyra said quietly, as if to herself. Corwin put a hand on her shoulder. "It's not your fault." But they both knew the truth. The thing wasn't confined to their house anymore. It had tasted freedom. And it liked it. That night, Corwin drove to Mrs. Ellery's. The shop was dark, but the door opened before he knocked. She stood in the doorway holding a lantern. "It's spreading," she said, not as a question but as fact. "Tamsin's gone," Corwin replied. Mrs. Ellery sighed, stepping aside to let him in. The shelves were rearranged, mirrors turned to face the wall, crystals wrapped in cloth. "Madeline didn't just open a door," she said again, as if reciting a prayer. "She taught it how to knock." "What do we do?" Corwin asked, desperation edging his voice. "There's only one way to close a door like this," she said, walking to a locked cabinet in the back. She opened it with a brass key and pulled out a small leather-bound book. "You don't banish it. You unmake it." She handed him the book. Its cover was blank, but when Corwin opened it, the pages were filled with names, hundreds of them written in different hands, different inks, spanning decades. At the very end, 2 names had been added in fresh ink: Lyra Vale, Tamsin Reed. "This is the Ledger of Echoes," Mrs. Ellery explained. "Every time it takes someone, their name appears. But if the original name, the one who first invited it, is erased, the chain breaks." "Madeline Croft," Corwin said. Mrs. Ellery nodded. But you can't just cross it out. You have to say her name in front of a mirror, and mean it, not as a ghost, not as a story, but as a person who lived, loved, and made a terrible mistake. You have to forgive her. Only then will the mirror release her, and everything that came after. Corwin stared at the book. And if I fail? Then it keeps growing, she said simply, until every reflection shows its face instead of yours. He took the book home. The next night, under a waning moon, Corwin stood in the empty space where the mirror once hung. He held a small hand mirror Mrs. Ellery had given him, old but uncracked, its silvering slightly tarnished at the edges. He took a deep breath. "Madeline Croft," he said, voice steady, "I see you. Not the thing you became, but the girl who missed her sister so much, she reached into the dark and begged for an answer." He paused, the words hanging in the air like smoke. "I forgive you." For a long moment nothing happened. Then the mirror in his hand grew warm. The glass clouded over, not with breath, but with tears, real, glistening droplets that rolled down the surface and fell onto his palm. And in the reflection, a girl with braided hair and sorrowful eyes looked back at him, and nodded. The next morning the name Madeline Croft was gone from the ledger. In its place a single line. "Thank you." Lyra's name remained, but it no longer glowed with that faint, sickly light it once had. It looked ordinary, human. Weeks passed, then months. The whispers never returned. The dream stopped. Even the creek behind their house seemed quieter, its surface rippling only when the wind blew. But Corwin never forgot. He still avoids mirrors when he can. He still teaches others, quietly, carefully, about the danger of looking too long, too deep. And sometimes, late at night, he opens the ledger and runs his fingers over the empty space where Madeline's name used to be. Because he knows. Some doors stay closed only as long as we remember why we shut them. And in a world full of screens, puddles, and polished glass, the watching never truly ends. By the time autumn returned to Brindle Hollow, the trees blazed in fiery reds and golds, and the air carried the crisp scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Life had settled into a rhythm that almost felt normal, almost. Corwin still kept a pouch of rosemary and quartz in his jacket pocket. Lyra still avoided puddles after rain. And their mother still left the hallway light on at night, though she never spoke of why. But peace, as Corwin had learned, is rarely permanent. It is borrowed. And debts always come due. It began with a photograph. Not digital, actual film. Left on their porch one morning, tucked inside a plain white envelope with no stamp, no postmark, just the word "remember" written in smudged pencil. The photo showed a teenage boy standing in front of a funhouse mirror at what looked like an old county fair. His reflection was stretched tall and thin, but his eyes, those were sharp, knowing. And beneath the image, scrawled in the same looping script as Madeline's letter, was a date, October 28, 1952. The day the boy from the newspaper clipping vanished. Corwin's hands shook as he turned the photo over. On the back, someone had written, "He's still in there." That afternoon, he drove to the Brindle County Historical Society, a converted church on the edge of town with peeling paint and sagging shutters. The curator, a retired schoolteacher named Mr. Darrow, recognized the photo immediately. "That's Eli Mercer," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Went missing during the fall fair. They searched the mirror maze for days. Found nothing but his cap, and this." He opened a drawer and pulled out a small, tarnished pocket watch. The glass face was cracked, and when Corwin held it up, his own reflection stared back, but blinked a second too late. "He was last seen talking to a girl," Mr. Darrow added quietly. "No one knew who she was. Just said she had eyes like river stones." Corwin's breath caught. That was how Lyra had described her reflection the night by the creek. Back home, he spread the photo, the watch, and the ledger of echoes across the kitchen table. Lyra sat across from him, arms crossed, watching the pocket watch's cracked face as if it might speak. "It's testing us," she said finally. "Now that Madeline's gone, it's reaching further back. Looking for another anchor." Corwin nodded. "If it finds one, the whole chain could reset. All those names, they might come back." That night, a cold rain began to fall. Not the gentle kind, but a hard, slanting downpour that drummed against the roof like impatient fingers. Around midnight the power flickered and died. In the sudden dark, Lyra whispered, "It's here." Corwin struck a match. The flame cast long shadows that danced along the walls, turning familiar shapes into strangers. He lit a candle, then another, lining them along the windowsill like sentinels. Then came the sound. Not from outside. Not from upstairs. From the basement. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone gently rapping on glass. Corwin grabbed the flashlight and the obsidian pouch. Lyra followed without protest, her face pale but determined. They descended the creaking stairs slowly, each step groaning underfoot. The basement was cold, colder than it should be in October. Their breath fogged in the beam of the flashlight. And there, on the concrete floor near the water heater, stood a full-length mirror. It hadn't been there before. Its frame was wrought iron, twisted into thorn-like spirals, and its surface was spotless, reflecting their wide-eyed faces with unnatural clarity. But something was wrong. In the reflection, Lyra's hair was longer. Corwin's jacket was different, older, patched at the elbows. And behind them, in the mirrored version of the basement, a third figure stood in the corner, barely visible in the shadows. Watching. "Don't look directly," Corwin warned, angling the flashlight away. "It's trying to pull us into its timeline." Lyra swallowed hard. "What do? We break the connection." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small vial Mrs. Ellery had given him weeks ago. "Just in case," she'd said. Inside was water from the Brindle Creek, blessed under a new moon and mixed with salt from the oldest road in town. He uncorked it and flung the liquid at the mirror. The glass hissed like hot metal in snow. Fog bloomed across its surface, and for a moment the reflection warped, showing not Corwin and Lyra but Madeline Croft, standing in a 1930s dress, tears streaming down her face as she reached toward them. Then the mirror shattered. Not with a crash, but with a sigh, as if it had been holding its breath for decades. Glass shards fell inward, vanishing before they hit the floor. Only the iron frame remained, now rusted and brittle, crumbling at the slightest touch. Silence returned. But the next morning something was different. Lyra woke with a faint scar on her wrist, the same shape as the bruises from months ago, but now silvery and smooth like healed lightning. And when Corwin checked the ledger of echoes, a new name had appeared, not in ink but burned into the page as if by heat. Eli Mercer. Beneath it a single word, waiting. Mrs. Ellery confirmed their fears when they visited her that afternoon. She held the ledger with trembling hands, her eyes clouded with dread. "It's not just mirrors anymore," she said. "Now that it's been unbound from Madeline, it's searching for every lost soul who ever looked into glass and wished for something more. Eli Mercer is just the beginning." "Can we save them?" Lyra asked. Mrs. Ellery looked at her for a long time. "You can try. But each rescue will cost you something. A memory, a year of your life, a piece of your voice. The veil doesn't give back for free." Corwin didn't hesitate. "We'll pay it." And so they prepared. They gathered river stones from the creek, whispering names over them as they polished each one smooth. They stitched protective sigils into the hems of their jackets using thread dyed with blackberry juice and ash. And they practiced speaking backward, not as a challenge but as a shield, twisting language into knots the watcher couldn't follow. Their first journey would be to the place where Eli Mercer vanished, the old fairgrounds now abandoned and overgrown on the outskirts of Brindle Hollow. The mirror maze still stood, though its panels were cracked and grimy, half swallowed by ivy. They went on a moonless night in early November. The wind carried the scent of rotting apples and wet leaves. The maze loomed ahead like a skeleton made of glass and rust. "You stay behind me," Corwin told Lyra. "And whatever you see, don't respond. Don't call its name. Don't even think its name." She nodded, gripping a river stone in her fist. Inside the maze, the air was thick and still. Every turn reflected a distorted version of themselves, stretched, squashed, multiplied. Some reflections moved on their own. One showed Lyra as an old woman, staring blankly. Another showed Corwin with hollow eyes, sketching endlessly in a book filled with screaming faces. Then, at the center of the maze, they found him. Eli Mercer stood before a single intact mirror, his back to them. He wore the same clothes from the photograph, but his hair was longer, his shoulders slumped with decades of waiting. "Eli," Corwin said softly. The boy turned. His eyes were clear, human. "You're real," he whispered, voice cracking. "I thought I'd dreamed you." "We're here to take you home," Lyra said. But as she stepped forward, the mirror behind Eli rippled. The glass darkened and a figure emerged, not stepping out but unfolding like smoke given shape. It wore Eli's face, but its smile was too wide, its movements too fluid. "You can't have him," it said in a voice that layered dozens of whispers. Madeline's, Tamsin's, boys and girls from decades past, all speaking at once. "He belongs to the glass now." Corwin raised the river stone. "He belongs to himself." He threw it at the mirror. The stone struck the surface, and passed through, shattering the illusion like thin ice. The false Eli dissolved into mist, shrieking as it unraveled. The real Eli gasped, stumbling forward as if waking from a deep sleep. Behind them, the entire maze began to collapse. Mirrors cracked and imploded, glass vanishing into voids that sealed themselves with a sound like distant thunder. They ran. Out in the open air, under a sky pricked with stars, Eli collapsed to his knees, sobbing. He didn't remember much, just flashes of laughter, carnival lights, and then endless corridors of glass. But he remembered his mother's face, his dog's name, the taste of apple pie. Those were enough. Back in Brindle Hollow, Mrs. Ellery welcomed him like a long-lost grandson. She gave him warm soup, dry clothes, and a room with no windows. Over the next few weeks, he began to heal, though he never looked at his reflection, not even in a spoon. And in the ledger of echoes, Eli Mercer's name faded until it disappeared entirely. But Corwin knew this was only the start, because as they drove home that night, Lyra pointed silently to the rearview mirror. For just a second, their reflections didn't move when they did. And in the distance, beyond the trees, the lights of another town flickered on. One where a teenager was just downloading a new filter, unaware that some doors, once opened, echo forever. Winter came early to Brindle Hollow that year. By the first week of December, frost clung to every window pane like lace, and the creek froze solid enough to walk on, if you dared. But no one did. Not after what happened to Lyra. The townsfolk had grown quieter, more watchful. Curtains stayed drawn after dusk. Car mirrors were covered with cloth. Even the diner stopped using glass tabletops, switching to chipped formica without explanation. Corwin noticed the change. So did Lyra. But they said nothing. Some truths are better left unspoken. Eli Mercer stayed with Mrs. Ellery, helping her organize the shop's back room and learning the old ways, the kind not written in books, but whispered over tea steeped with yarrow and thyme. He rarely spoke of the maze, but sometimes, when the wind howled just right, he'd flinch as if hearing echoes only he could hear. Then, on a still night just before the winter solstice, the ledger of echoes began to bleed. Not literally, but the pages grew damp as if soaked in river water, and new names appeared overnight, written in a shaky, desperate hand. * Marlowe Finch. Darius Boone. Juniper Vale. *. Corwin froze at the last one. Juniper Vale? That's our great-aunt. She died in 1963. Lyra's breath caught. She's the one who left us the mirror. Mrs. Ellery, when shown the name, went pale. Juniper didn't just own that mirror, she said, voice low. She made it. The truth unraveled slowly, like thread pulled from an old coat. Juniper Vale had been a glassblower in her youth, apprenticed to a traveling artisan who claimed his craft came from the other side of sight. She'd melted sand, silver nitrate, and something else, something she'd never name, into a single sheet of glass, intending to create a mirror that could show the soul as it truly is. But the mirror showed more than that. It showed what watched back. She'd locked it away for decades. Until, in her final years, she gave it to her grandniece's family, saying only, "Keep it covered unless you mean to look deep." She hadn't known it was already hungry. Now, with Madeline's tether broken, the mirror's true origin was resurfacing, and with it, every soul it had ever touched. "We have to find Juniper's workshop," Corwin said. If she made it, she might have left a way to unmake it. Mrs. Ellery nodded. It's in the woods behind the old mill. But be warned, the path changes. It only appears when the seeker carries a piece of the mirror's memory. Lyra looked at her scarred wrist. I think I qualify. They set out at dawn, the world hushed under a blanket of fresh snow. Eli insisted on coming, clutching a pouch of iron filings and dried sage. I owe you, he said simply. The trail to the mill was overgrown, barely visible beneath the drifts. But as they walked, the trees seemed to lean inward, forming a tunnel of bare branches that guided them forward. At the center of a frozen clearing stood a small stone hut, its roof sagging, its door bound shut with rusted chains. Yet when Lyra stepped forward, the chains fell away with a soft clink. Inside, dust motes floated in the weak light filtering through cracked windows. Shelves lined the walls, holding jars of colored glass, twisted tools, and notebooks filled with sketches of eyes, doorways, and spirals that made Corwin's head ache if he stared too long. In the center of the room sat a workbench, and on it, a single, unfinished mirror frame, empty except for a shallow groove where the glass should have been. Taped to the wood was a letter, yellowed but legible. To whoever finds this, I tried to cage it. But glass is not a prison, it is a promise. And promises, once made to the unseen, cannot be broken by hands alone. Only by truth. Only by naming what it truly is. Not a spirit, not a ghost, but a hunger that learned to wear faces. If you read this, it has already tasted your name. Do not fight it with force. Feed it what it cannot digest. Forgiveness for those it took, and sorrow for the loneliness that made it reach through the glass in the first place. Then and only then will it release its hold. Juniper. Corwin read the words aloud, his voice trembling. Outside the wind stilled. Even the snow seemed to pause midair. Lyra touched the empty frame. It's waiting for us to finish it. No, Eli said suddenly. It's waiting for us to refuse. And in that moment they understood. The mirror didn't need glass to exist anymore. It lived in every screen, every puddle, every polished surface where someone might pause and wonder, is that really me? Its power came not from reflection, but from doubt. So they did the one thing it never expected. They left the workshop empty-handed. No ritual. No confrontation. No final battle. Just a quiet walk back through the snow, 3 figures side by side, choosing to believe in the world as it was, not as the glass twisted it. For weeks nothing happened. Then on Christmas Eve, as the town gathered for carols in the square, Corwin noticed something strange. The shop windows, once covered or frosted, were clear again. People stood before them, adjusting scarves, fixing hair, smiling at their own reflections without fear. Even Lyra paused before the bakery window, watching her breath fog the glass, then fade. It's still there, she murmured. But it's smaller. Corwin nodded. Because we stopped feeding it. That night, as snow fell softly over Brindle Hollow, the ledger of echoes lay open on the kitchen table. One by one, the names began to vanish, not all at once, but gently, like leaves letting go in autumn. Marlowe Finch. Darius Boone. Even Tamsin Reed's name softened, then dissolved into the page. Only one remained, Lyra Vale. But this time it wasn't written in cold ink. It was in her own handwriting. She'd added it herself. I had to, she told Corwin the next morning. If it ever comes back, it'll look for me first. And I'll be ready. He didn't argue. He just hugged her longer than usual. Months passed. Spring returned. The creek thawed. And life, fragile but persistent, bloomed again. But far away, in cities and suburbs untouched by Brindle Hollow's quiet war, new challenges surfaced. Lens of the lost. Backward gaze. Echo selfie. Each one a variation, each one a whisper wrapped in algorithmic candy. Teens tried them, laughed, posted, moved on, unaware that every glance lingered a second too long, every reflection held its breath just a moment after they looked away. And sometimes in the dead of night, a phone screen would flicker to life on its own, showing not the lock screen, but a face that looked almost like yours, smiling when you weren't. Back in Brindle Hollow, Corwin still sketches. But now, his drawings show open windows, sunlit rooms, and people walking away from mirrors without looking back. Lyra teaches art at the community center, showing kids how to paint with their eyes closed, trusting their hands more than their sight. Eli works at the library, quietly pulling books on folklore and replacing them with stories about courage, connection, and the quiet strength of ordinary light. They know the Watcher hasn't vanished. It never will. But it's weaker now, starved of fear, denied the feast of doubt. And in the ledger of echoes, the last page remains blank, waiting, not for a name, but for a choice. Because the true curse was never the mirror. It was the belief that you weren't enough as you were, that someone, something in the glass might be better, truer, more loved. But you are. You always were. So the next time you pass a window, a puddle, a screen, don't look for glitches. Don't search for smiles that aren't yours. Just keep walking. Keep living. Keep believing in the warmth of your own breath on cold glass. That's how you win. Not with fire. Not with fear. But with the quiet, stubborn act of being real. But peace, as Corwin had learned too well, is never the end. It's only the silence between breaths. On the morning of October 28th, 2 years to the day after Lyra first whispered into the mirror, the town of Brindle Hollow woke to an unnatural stillness. No birds sang. No wind stirred the leaves. Even the creek ran soundless, its surface smooth as polished obsidian. Lyra was the first to notice something wrong. She stood at the kitchen sink, washing a coffee mug, when she caught her reflection in the stainless steel faucet. It blinked. She hadn't. Her breath hitched, but she didn't look away. She couldn't. Because this time, her reflection didn't smile or tilt its head. It just stared, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if trying to warn her. Then, slowly, it raised a finger to its lips. Behind her, the back door creaked open. Lyra spun around. The porch was empty. But on the wooden step, resting atop a single fallen maple leaf, was a small hand mirror, its frame wrapped in black thread, its glass pristine. She didn't touch it. Instead, she called Corwin. He arrived within minutes, pale and out of breath, clutching the ledger of echoes. Its pages were blank, completely blank, as if every name had been erased not by time, but by something that had read them all and remembered. That night, they gathered in the living room with Eli and Mrs. Ellery. Candles burned low. Salt lined the windowsills. Every reflective surface was covered. But at exactly 11:59, the power went out. And in the sudden dark, Lyra's phone lit up on its own. The screen showed the front camera. Her face filled the frame, but she was still sitting on the couch, facing away from the device. On screen, her digital self turned its head slowly toward the lens, and whispered in a voice that was hers, yet hollow as a dry well. It's not a curse. It's a welcome. The next morning, Corwin found Lyra's bed empty. Her jacket was gone. Her shoes too. But on her pillow lay the obsidian pouch, torn open, its contents spilled, rosemary crushed, quartz cracked, thread unraveled. And on the bathroom mirror, the one they kept covered for 2 years, the cloth had been pulled aside. Written in condensation, as if breathed by someone standing very close, were 3 words. I'm already home. Weeks passed. No one saw Lyra again. Corwin searched every creek, every abandoned house, every stretch of glassy ice. Eli combed through old records looking for patterns, for signs. Mrs. Ellery burned sage until her hands blistered. But Brindle Hollow returned to its quiet rhythm. Children played near the frozen creek. Tourists snapped photos of autumn leaves. Life went on. Except in one house. Corwin still lives there. Alone. He keeps the curtains drawn. Never uses a phone with a front camera. Drinks from ceramic mugs. And every night, just before bed, he checks the mirrors. Covered, always covered. But sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, he hears it. A soft tapping. Not on the window. Not on the door. On the inside of the glass. And if he listens closely, really closely, he can hear her voice, faint but clear, singing that old lullaby, the one she heard the night the mirror smiled. Only now, the voice isn't coming from the other side. It's coming from his own reflection. Because Lyra never left. She just stopped being the one who looked. And somewhere in 1,000 towns just like Brindle Hollow, another teenager picks up their phone, opens a new filter and leans closer to the screen, unaware that the thing staring back isn't learning to mimic them. It's remembering how to wear them. Thank you for listening to this final chapter from Shadow Storyteller. If you ever feel a chill when your reflection blinks, or if your phone lights up in the dark for no reason, remember, some stories don't end. They just wait for someone new to look. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Sleep well if you still can.